Well, welcome, Anna, to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you because what we're going to talk about today and what you're going to help us with is executive functioning and how do we help our tweens and teens with this. And you personally are in it right now with one of your kids. And I've been there with, especially with one of my kids, but two of my kids really struggled with executive functioning, and it is not easy at all.
No, it's utterly exhausting. I mean, I always joke that I was an expert in ADHD and executive functioning challenges, and I was doing neuropsych reports, and I was doing this for, I think, 7 or 8 years before I had my own child with these challenges. And it brought me to my knees. It was, here I was telling parents what to do, and then I got in it myself, and I felt utterly overwhelmed and tired. And it's been a really long road. So I'm excited to share from that intersection.
Well, thank you for sharing that because it is comforting when we know that it's not just us when we're in the midst of this.
Absolutely.
And we can feel like we're failing, we don't know what to do, having all these power struggles and these arguments and these fights. And I mean, at least that's what I was doing when I didn't know how to do it differently. It was just super frustrating.
Super frustrating, and really, the word I use is activating. Like, it sets your central nervous system online. It really gets you in your own sort of space of hurt and pain and worry, and how do we manage our kids best when we feel that way. So absolutely. And I give parent talks and workshops, and I always try to start off by saying, I am speaking to this dream of what we could do. But if you take one thing away that you do differently, that's wonderful and a miracle, and something that we all should really celebrate.
Yeah, activating. That is a perfect word because it is activating.
Yeah, it's your central, and I think it's really helpful to recognize within ourselves as parents, because you feel that heat, right? Like, you feel your brain. If you start to pay attention, you turn into a different version of yourself right in front of them. It's like all of a sudden you're arguing with your, whatever, however old, you're in the thing with them, instead of from a parental loving perspective or holding their experience fully. That's when things really go south.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Everybody's like, oh yeah, I know what that feels like. Why do you think that? Why do you think we get so activated?
Well, first of all, I think there's a lot of fear that we sit with, when, especially around, our current academic structure requires strong executive functioning. It asks it of us at all levels. And so every single time that kids are told to turn something in or get someplace on time or prioritize or manage time, there's a weight on it. It's results oriented, and we're told that they need to do that to be successful, to get the thing that they need. And as parents, we want that for them. So we watch them start to deteriorate in it, and it's scary. We don't want it to be scary. We can hold perspective sometimes, but in the moment, even being late to school, it's like you got to get to school. This is crucial. Like, it's going to set your whole. It's so big, and it gets so big, and it brings up all of the pieces. And God forbid, we also have to get to work. Or like there's something that we need to do, so that adds the stress. And then all of a sudden, our bodies are saying, this is scary. We're in fight or flight, and we need them to do something. And then they're done with us. I mean, that's the best part, right? The minute we're in that mode, they're like, oh, yeah, you want me to get to school on time? So, you let me tell you, like, that's not right. So they're activated, and we're in the fear together, and we're really losing the perspective of, it's a day and they might be 10 minutes late. We can't hold that in the moment.
Yes. Ah, I'm feeling it as you share it. I can just feel how it feels. And you described it perfectly. And especially if we've got to get somewhere and then we're thinking they cannot have another detention, they can't have, or then they dig in their heels even more, which is super frustrating because it does not work
Nope.
when we're all anxious and in that place and putting pressure on them, especially if you have a strong-willed one. They're like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
try
exactly.
and make me.
Right. But double down. I got you.
Oh boy. All right. Hopefully our listeners are feeling some sense of comfort right now. So let's talk. I I don't know that I've anybody had anybody come on exactly to talk about executive functioning. And I want you, we think we know what that means, but you have a lot of background and there's a lot of different pieces and parts of it. So what exactly is executive functioning?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard question to answer because even in the research and the literature, it's not a completely agreed upon construct, and it's an interrelated set of cognitive processes. So when you get into the brain science of it, it's not easy to just describe. And a lot of what we know is actually sort of the ways it manifests. Like people are like, oh, it's prioritization and time management and organizing, and that's true. But I think in this moment, I really just want to name the brain level piece of it because I think it's organizing and helpful and allows us to be more flexible in our thinking about what the challenges are and to understand empathically what's going on. So it's really at its core, I would say it's working memory, which is it's not short term or long term memory. That's like the post-it note system in our brain. That's when I give you information and you have to take it in and then spit it back out in a different form. My perfect example of this is get ready for school. What does that mean? That actually holding in mind, right, has all of these different pieces to it of I need to get my backpack, I need to get my shin guards for soccer practice, I need to brush my hair, I need to brush my teeth. So many things packed into that statement. And actually, then it has a number of things that you have to get done in order to get to school and get ready. And you have to hold all that in your mind and then actually do something about it. Right? So that's
Yeah,
actually right,
yes.
or like my favorite example, like a server at a restaurant and the people who take down your order and they don't even have to flinch and you're like, "Hold the, mayo and I'm gluten free." And they're like, "Yep, yep, got it." And you're watching them sort of file it in their brains. And then they're the people who look at you and you're like, "I'm sorry, did you say what was it? Was it the Diet Coke or the Pepsi?" And you're like, "It was Sprite." Like you're sort of right. And it's really, you see that range right there of working memory, taking it in, filing it, and then spitting it back out. And so that's one of the core components. We can really think about how impactful that is in school, right? Or just getting through your day. And then there's basically what's called self control. And I want to not think about it just in our, sort of easy association to that, but that's really, it's delaying gratification, it's inhibiting a response, like Simon says. It's self regulation in terms of a greater goal. It's actually like the not looking at something. So when you have to stop, being on your phone and get yourself out of the house, that's a form of self control. That's an executive functioning. And then mental flexibility. And that's actually sustaining or shifting attention in response to different demands or applying different rules in different settings. And that's also really important. So, those key components, and when you start to think about them, right, all of a sudden you're not just like, oh, it's organizing, right? Oh, it's prioritizing, it's time management. It's like these things are actually really complicated and they play out across our lives in so many different ways. And I'm sure everyone's minds are spinning already, thinking, oh, wow, yeah, I can really see the ways that impacts.
Yes, and I even think about, and then the time piece. So when you say get ready for school, you have all these things to do, but then it's supposed to happen within the construct of the time that you have.
Oh,
And you can get, yeah, off on, oh, I'm going to look at my phone because my friend's texting me, or
right.
and then you get sucked into that and that self-control piece. So there's so many pits you can fall into with this.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought up time because actually, I think time blindness has become a sort of paradigm people are using more. And it's really important to understand. But people feel time differently. And an executive functioning challenge can be not feeling time. I have very strong executive functions. I feel time passing constantly. People might think this is great, but if I get a massage, I'm like, I have 17 minutes left. It's very hard for me to relax,
I'm
but
so that way.
right,
I tell
exactly.
you.
We're so great,
I get
but we're
sad. I'm
right.
sad halfway through that it's going to end. I'm like,
Exactly. But we're definitely going to make it to dinner on time, But at the same time, people who don't feel time that way, it's like you're saying you have 10 minutes to get ready for school, and your child might not feel what that means. And so that's why, and I'm throwing in a tip right off the top, but visual timers are so important for this. And the company Time Timers has an app, and it's like the way, but some people who can't internalize time, they have to see it. Otherwise, it's meaningless. So we're saying to them, It's like telling a kid who doesn't tell time, you've got 10 minutes left. Like, what does that mean? I don't feel that in my body. And so they're sitting there and they've got one sock on and they're texting someone. And you're like, how could you not be hustling? But they have no hustle because they don't feel the time coming closer. So you have to have a visual representation of it or they don't know what you're talking about. And you saying over and over again, you got 7 minutes left, you got 5 minutes. Great. Like what, it doesn't mean anything. So being able to understand empathically that some people don't feel that in their bodies really can help you understand why you're screaming 5 minutes left, 4 minutes left, 3 minutes left isn't helping you.
Gosh, is that good? I've never heard anybody explain it that way. Don't feel time in your body.
Yeah. And well, it's hard for you, right? Because you do. So
Yes, I do. I do. I do have ADHD. I discovered that when my kids got diagnosed and they looked at me and said, "Mom, you have it."
yeah.
And then I that's how I found out what my issue is. And I think, I do feel time, and because a lot of times I feel like I'm falling behind, so I don't want to feel behind, if that makes sense. But I get hyper focused. That must be another one too. And so
Yep.
I have a really hard time shifting
Yep.
out
Shifting
of,
sets.
yes, shifting out of one thing to the next. So, because I'm so into it, and that really
Yep.
gets in my way. So,
Of course. And yeah. And think about how many times you're asked to shift sets. And so shifting sets is something we actually look at on neurocognitive assessments. If we really have a way that we test for this. And it's amazing to see how ADHD, the executive functioning challenges, how there's a lag. It's like you're asked to look for one thing and your mind is still in it, even when you're asked for the next thing. And think about how many times we're asked to transition as teenagers in a day, not just getting in and out of the house, but between classes. And so if their mind is still in another place, there's this lag that happens. One of my favorite moments, I went to observe a kid with ADHD who was in the third grade, and all the kids were doing the electric slide, and there was one kid doing the Macarena. I hadn't even found out who the kid was. I was like, I know, it's her, isn't it? Because she was still. I said, when did you learn the Macarena? And they said, we were doing that last week. And I was like, yes, but she's hyper focused on it. She's still in it, so she can't do the transition that everyone else is doing. And you could watch it in this beautiful way. And then if you think about that with teenagers, sometimes they're stuck in the last thing. You're like, why are you stuck there? Because they're still there in their brains.
that's so good. And to be able to understand that gives you empathy. It's not like you're
Yeah.
doing it on purpose. My husband
Right.
will say something to me, and I'll still be on the last thing he said.
Yep.
I'll be really digesting that. And then I've coached myself now. I will say, okay, wait, wait, wait. I didn't just hear that last thing because I'm
Yep.
still on that thing.
Yeah, but right, and those are two adults, and you're struggling with our teenagers. They're back in the thing you said 5 minutes ago, and you're so frustrated because you need them to hear the next thing, and they didn't hear you, and they don't have language for that. And it's really important to understand. It's like, oh wait, you didn't hear me, and not why aren't you listening to me? Right? Like there's such an important part. It's like we interpret so much of this behavior as oppositional or resistant. You're not listening. Well, actually, no, because not because they're not listening to you intentionally, but because their brain is still back in the last thing you said and they're really focusing on it.
Wow. Yep. So good. So good. So you have an extensive background, and you're a psychologist, and you also started organizational tutors. And so I'm curious, how did what you were doing lead you to what you're doing now?
I mean, so basically, I was doing neuropsychological assessment. I was doing those big batteries of tests where we discover people's learning differences and all the emotional complications and looking at all of the developmental and academic and emotional. And at that time, 20 years ago, when there were executive functioning challenges, there wasn't anyone to implement the findings who could hold all of these different perspectives. So, what that really meant was a kid would be having these challenges and the parent would turn to me and say, it's like, okay, now what? Like I'm not going to sit with her and do homework every night. I'm working. This sounds like a lot. Working memory challenges, visual, spatial, what am I supposed to do? And so I started doing the work myself and just started to implement it from that perspective. And then I realized how much of this was relationship based. Like, you need to have a really good relationship. This is intimate, it's vulnerable. I'm also a psychologist, and I always say in therapy, you can kind of choose what you bring in and what you don't. But with executive functioning coaching, and this is really relevant for adults too, I'm in your business. I'm like, open your email. You know, oh, no, I'm on top of it. Open your email, right? So I'm in it with you. And so you have to really like me and trust me, and we have to be a good fit. And in case you can't tell, I have a strong personality and I'm not meant for everybody. So I started really collecting other people to do this work who I felt were really good fits and other expertise and other kinds of psychological and neurocognitive complexities. And that's how the company was born. Actually, I'm sitting right at dinner and a friend said, "Do you have a website?" I'm old, right? And I said, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." So that's how my company was even named, was just this somebody telling me I needed to have a website, and I was like, "Oh, what? A domain what?" Um, I got you, but this is, and that's how I started doing this work. And then the parents of these kids started contacting me because it's 50% genetic. So people would say, "I think I also have these challenges. Can I have organizational tutoring?" And I thought maybe we should have something that's more developmentally appropriate for you. So we started an adult company, and then there was all these people who were coming saying it's executive functioning challenge, but it's also it's anxiety and this intersection. So then I launched an in-home therapy company. So each thing kind of came out of this natural progression of what's really challenging. And I still work really closely with high conflict, like, parent guidance and family systems, because a lot of times this regulatory challenge and the intensity of kids with these struggles really causes escalation in the home. And it's something I so personally relate to and I'm comfortable talking and thinking about, that I try to work very directly in those spaces without judgment. There's a lot of, like, don't yell at your children. It's like, yes, nobody wants to yell. We all agree. We're not interested in that. And it's really hard. So how do we do it and how do we think about it? And I work in those spaces from a real passion project, self-knowing and experience place.
Yeah, I love when we jumped on here, and you were talking about, yeah, I never thought that here doing all this, that here I am with my own teenager that's going through this. And
Yeah.
even though we never want to, or have to go through this, that's the beauty of what helps you do what you do and
Yeah.
be able to better help parents because you get it.
Well, also the other thing I have to be honest about is my daughter schooled me. I mean, there were times where, here I am, this expert, I'd be giving a talk, and then I'd come home and she would lose it at me and I would lose it. And I would, lock myself in the bathroom, and I was like, I have to calm down, but I didn't feel calm. And she taught me, I wrote this article one time because I couldn't believe she taught me this, but she taught me what the art of the restart, because she would have this dysregulation and she would be done. And I have to be honest with you, I wasn't done. I was still mad. My central nervous system was still mine. And I wanted her to understand why she had, like, that was not okay. And let me tell you, and she was done and I was dragging it out. And I didn't give her the space and the time to calm herself and fuel herself. And she many times taught me that over and over again. From sitting in car rides, she would put her headphones on. And I was like, "Excuse me, I am driving you to your friend's house. Why aren't you talking to me?" And she said, "Mom, I need to fuel myself. And when we are sitting here together, I'm not getting the downtime I need to get the fuel that I require to go out in the world." And I just sat there and I thought, yeah, I do read about that stuff. Yeah, yeah, good to. Someone did tell me that, but then, like, living it, I felt so rejected by her, but she was teaching me something. And the restart was like, she expressed she was dysregulated, then she regulated herself, and I was drawing her back into dysregulation. I mean, it was like I was watching myself do these things, and it took so much work for me to learn how I needed to calm myself down. Like, I needed to go take my own breath, stop focusing on, like, you should take a breath, I should take a breath.
Yeah.
And so I just really had to change the way I was approaching parenting, and that was very challenging.
Yeah. Anna, that's so good. So what to the mom like is like, yeah, I'm there. And what I experience working with moms is the amount of guilt they feel. They're like,
Mm,
I thought I made progress. here I had worked on it and my relationship is so much better, but here I am yelling again with my kid, and I just feel
Mhm.
terrible about that. What would you say to that mom, and what has helped you with your daughter to be able to calm yourself?
Well, I mean, listen, if she were on here, she'd be like, well, let me tell you about how my mom has not, so let's not act like I have it all under control. But the thing that actually helps me the most internally in being forgiving of myself is an understanding of the importance of rupture and repair. That I actually really believe that the most growth comes out of the moment of repair after the rupture. So I don't actually, I apologize. I'm grateful. I say all the time, listen, I really hear you that I missed on that. And I wish I had been more collaborative in it. And I didn't mean to be punitive, but I see what happened. And how can you help me do it differently next time? And, that doesn't mean I don't set limits, and it doesn't mean there aren't endless boundaries, but, like I don't want to be yelled at. So sometimes I will say, like, I hear your frustration and I'm going to step away until you can communicate that to me differently. And that's okay. You're not supposed to just take it, but there's a way in which I have learned that the process is much more important. And so I don't feel badly when I make mistakes. I really don't. I just say, I'm really sorry. And I want to do it differently. And how can we do it differently? And I really try to look for what I call like the growth edge, the developmental period that my daughter is actually in, and not the developmental age that, or like the chronological age that she's supposed to be. And I try to really address things from that perspective. And I do that for myself too. So I think about all of our parts of self, from the internal family systems language, we're different ages in different ways. And I try to say, like, okay, I was acting like I was 12. I need to I need to think about that. I'm sorry I joined you there. You were, in a place where you were really struggling like you're 5. And so instead of addressing you like you're an adult, I need to like hold you and leave room for you to be 6 and then 7 and then 8 and then 9. And I really try to think about it from that lens instead of getting bogged down in the like, you're 16, you should blah blah blah. I'm like, I'm an adult and I should, and try to get out of that narrative. Does that make sense?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. And I liked what you said about I try to be in the process of it versus, guilting myself. I'm in the
Yeah.
process, rupture and repair.
Yeah.
And so giving and when you talked about there's intimacy in this relationship. Can you speak
Hmm.
on that? Because there is, and it's really about the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really about, from the coaching to parenting to all those things. It's like the more vulnerability, and this is, I think, something that people in their heads understand, but I think the lived experience is actually hard to sit with, where we want to move towards vulnerability. And the more vulnerable we are and the more we're leading from our vulnerability, the more intimacy is able to be developed, right? Because making the mistakes or showing your true colors or whatever way you want to say it, that's actually where we get close. That's where we build relationship. And with our own children, when we stay in this like top down position where we're telling them what to do or being punishing or do something wrong but stand by the decision, we actually aren't allowing that kind of intimacy and from the vulnerability to come. When we say, hey, I really was speaking from a young part of myself, I really made a mistake and I want to try to redo it, that actually gives room for trust to build. Right? Oh, you make mistakes and you take responsibility for yourself. Very hard for me to trust someone who can't take responsibility for themselves. Like that's a big ask. If you can't see yourself, how are you going to see me? If you don't know you, how are you going to know me? That
Mhm.
goes the same with kids. If they don't trust their parents or their coach or anyone to really see them and know them, then they're not going to show up with their true self and they're not going to make movement in the same way.
And I'm struck by how when we do that, it's less about the blame.
Yes.
And there's so much shame that comes from
Hmm.
struggling, whether it's executive functioning or we're yelling or whatever that is, there's shame. And then when we feel shame, then we want to blame. And
Yep.
then you get nowhere. Then you don't feel seen or heard.
Right.
And being able to be open, I love that. That was beautiful. And share, yeah, I don't like the way that I handled that. And that was that younger part of me. You talked about internal family systems, and we could do a whole podcast on that. I love
Yeah,
internal family systems. Will
me
you
too.
just explain that to moms a little bit? Because that learning that changed the way I saw myself, I saw the way my family operated. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's right. We could do a whole podcast on that. And it's Schwartz did the internal family systems is almost like the idea that you have all of these different parts of self, but we're not one person, and that we have different ages and different, we have different versions, from vulnerable little kids inside of us to the protectors that came out to fight for them. And just at the simplest level, it's this idea that we have all of these parts alive within us and that they are speaking to us all the time and showing up. And I think for teenagers in particular, when you have that experience of like 1 minute she's like this and then next minute they're like that, that's right. Because there are different parts of self that we speak from. And when we're in those parts, sometimes we actually aren't in touch with the other parts. And that our goal is to be centered and grounded in what we call self driven, which is an integration of those parts where they speak to each other and we can really hear them and hold them and understand them. But as teenagers, that's not something, it's something we're working towards, but most adults aren't even doing that. It's very challenging work. And the way that I like to say it's like sort of easiest to understand this for me is the voices in your head. Like if you pay attention, right? I'll have a voice in my head that says like, "Oh, you totally screwed that up." And it's like, who's saying that? Like, what do you
Yeah.
mean I totally screwed that up? Like what, and why are you saying it? And if I start to listen, that voice within me will actually really have a lot to say. And I'll realize that part's really young. Like it's speaking to me. It's like, well, you're always a screw up. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm always a screw up? Like I'm an adult. I'm doing just fine. Thank you. And I really can listen and I can realize that there's a part of me that's alive and hurting that may have come out of a very different period of my life, and that I need to actually ask questions and figure out why they're upset in that moment. That's the briefest summary that I think I could
Yeah.
give, but
Yeah.
I think it's super helpful in thinking about teenagers. Instead of thinking, why are they so back and forth? It's like, well, they have all these different parts alive in them, and we want to understand why they feel that way and what part is coming forward.
I love that. Yeah, it was helpful for me. This might be another example to that might be helpful is when my daughter hit middle school and she started expressing all this anger. I felt like the little kid that was bullied back in second, third, fourth grade.
Yep. There you go.
And that would be activated. I felt so young with
Yep.
her, and I didn't know how to take care of myself. It
Yep.
was like that. And so I would be like fighting back, but it was like this young, I was not in my adult self. I was back in that time. And so just,
Totally.
yeah, recognizing that gosh, I feel like I'm being bullied again, like I felt in middle school. And so the question became, okay, well, what's going on for her? She's not even feeling heard by me because I am so activated by being bullied that I'm not hearing her either and what she needs because I'm stuck back there and it feels very familiar. So it's just,
That's a beautiful example.
yeah,
Yeah.
it just really helps us to understand and have compassion for ourselves and our kids in a whole new way.
Yep. I think you did a much better job articulating that than I did. And I really love that. And it feels exactly right. And I've had many moments like that where I find myself, really feeling attacked by my child who's not, meaning in any way to attack me. And and she feels so upset at her not being seen or heard. And really understanding it from that lens allows us to make movement and talk about it differently instead of feeling in it. And like the word they use is blended with that part. So it's so different to say like, stop talking to me that way, which is the don't bully me, versus, wow, I am feeling really hurt and angry. And like speaking up, we say, the difference speaking about the part versus from the part. And that difference is to me the difference between the activation, like the heat in your body where you're like, don't bully me, versus, wow, I feel so bullied right now. I need to do it differently.
Yes, that's good. So just making that shift, I feel so heard.
Mhm. Yeah. right? Versus
That's a
I'm hurt.
vulnerability. Yeah,
Yep,
that's a vulnerability piece.
exactly. Exactly.
And you get a a much different response, and you're teaching your kids how to really work through conflict and their emotions and their feelings, and yeah,
Totally.
and have a more intimate relationship, which is what you were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of my nightmare slides when I give a talk is about modeling, right? So whenever we get to the executive functioning concrete stuff, I'm always like, well, here's the worst slide where I tell you as parents, when you model good behavior, you know, you'll get better responses. And what I always joke about is here's the trick to it that I try to embrace. At least I'm not having my have to make my teenager do it because that sounds like a nightmare. Like put your phone away. It's much easier for me to say, I'm going to put my phone away. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to take a breath than it is to make them do it. So if modeling is really so impactful, at least I have control over myself. And I actually try to embrace it from that lens versus like, you need to model everything so perfectly for your child. It's like, okay, well, anything that I do for myself, take a breath, speak about the part, put my phone away, use a timer, set up an agenda for myself, write out my calendar. Anything that I do is actually effective modeling for my teenager. Whether or not we are getting direct impact, it has long term impact. And I just try to lean in on that version of it.
That is such a good distinction because moms do get really discouraged if you say the modeling, but just sharing, because I don't think somehow we believe that if we are
Yeah.
modeling it for ourselves, that that really is impactful to our kids. I don't know. I mean, maybe moms are like, no, no, I believe that. But it's like, I don't know. I just have found my kids being older now, that truly is where the rubber meets the road. That is what
Yeah.
it's about.
But also, I don't want to be told another thing to do. I mean, that's the other thing. It's like anytime you give a parent talk or someone's like, you get some expert on the line and they're like, let me tell you the things you should do. I had 3 kids. They were all really challenging. I was like, you're going to tell me to do another thing. Oh, you're going to tell me to map out my morning. I was so annoyed, like I was like, you map out my morning. I mean, I was so frustrated. Like, you don't ask me to do another thing. And so as a parent, I think that's the mind shift right there. It's like, I can't be told by some person who thinks they know better than me what to do to make this easier. You're not living my life. But I did realize like, but I can do things to make it a little easier for myself. And I do actually believe that. So what could I do that would feel relieving and not pressureful?
Yeah, that is really good. So when parents come to you so tell me how that process works because you're doing really great work and you have so many coaches. How does it work? Yeah, I'll just open it
Yeah,
up.
it's sort of like a matchmaking process, right? So one of the things I realized really quickly is I wanted to talk directly to parents. I wanted to hear what they had to say. I wanted to not just know like they have executive functioning challenges, but it's like what is the manifestation of the challenge in your life? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What are your kids' passions? And then on the back end, we work in developmental periods. So it's like, oh, is it a middle schooler? Is it a high schooler? Oh, your kid loves musical theater. That's a strength. So let's find someone who's a musical theater person over here who's going to, sing the review sheet. Like, let's do it together, and really think about utilizing those strengths and those competencies to come up with effective coping strategies together and be collaborative. And then we take a really systemic approach and like include the parents, include the school, include the teachers to really say, how do we hold the whole system in mind and, help create these relationships where you have internalized change, right? Coaches should be rendered useless. If you're a good executive functioning coach, you should not be around forever because we should be having synaptic level change where somebody leaves that feeling like, I know how to do this. My proudest moments are when I've had college students like text me that I worked with in middle school saying, somebody just called me organized and like snap a picture of their color coded calendar. And it's like, and I'm like, oh, we really did that together. We created a way that you feel organized, that you have a system that works for you, that I didn't tell you what to do and I didn't teach you, that I was like with you together doing it. And you felt supported and understood and seen and formed a better relationship with your calendar and a better relationship with the clock. And that's what makes a difference. I'm not a believer in like the teaching of the skills. If they could learn them, they would have. Like that's not the way it works when you have executive functioning challenges. People don't tell you over and over again. Don't tell an adult with ADHD to read the book on ADHD. It's like if I could read the book on ADHD, Wouldn't you think that I made the changes already? Thank you. Like it's a so it's I think being seen and heard and known, and then having the relationship, and then moving forward with some of those tools, but together.
So it's not just, so what do you, okay, so I could say, okay, so tell us some tips for the moms on here of how they can help their kids with executive functioning. What would you say to that?
Would say that you can do like, one of the most basic versions of this that's very concrete, but I really believe in is like you could do a calendar together. You can do a family calendar. You can color code it. They can, from younger kids who want to just color it in or make symbols for you, but you can work backward off deadlines and be realistic with them instead of saying, like, what do you have to do for homework? You can say, oh, do you want me to sit and write out what you have for homework? And then we can think about what's most important together and then sort of work backward off a deadline, and do you want me to set the timer? It's like, what developmental age are they? Are they ADHD is a 3-year developmental lag in executive functioning skills in particular. So you don't tell someone who's, they may be 13, but they're 10 or 9 if you add the pandemic. You don't tell them to do the same thing you would tell a 13-year-old. So you do some scaffolding and you intentionally sit down and model that kind of work that I think is also really helps with anxiety because you're not sitting there saying, get started on your work. You help initiate the tasks. Like, what can we do to set this up for you well? You make sure that kids don't have a blank page that they're staring at on their computer. Oh, do you want to type out the question or like the most important parts of the question together? So you help initiate, you help make a plan, and then you step back. You don't just over and over again say, what's the plan? Like these are the ways that like little changes I think are very impactful.
Yeah, because that is good. Because I used to sit there like, well, where do you even start? They may
Right.
not even know where to start. I felt like a lot
That's
of
right.
times I didn't even know where to start. Nobody taught me where to start. Where do I start?
Right. And so help starting, right? Then you get that, or even saying, how about you tell me the first 3 thoughts that come to your mind and I'll type out those 3 thoughts and then I'm going to leave is much better than sitting next to them, staring at them saying, why haven't you started your homework? So it's really, I think that the tips, that from the visual timers to setting a little bit of an agenda, working backwards off deadlines, and it just makes sense. It's like, if you have a paper due on Monday, when do you need to have the conclusion done? When do you need editing done? So you work backwards so it's real time instead of you should start your essay due next week tomorrow because that's fantasy time. No one feels that. So you work backward and then you integrate real life things, right? So someone's like, "Oh, I'm going to work on my essay this weekend." Actually, you have 3 soccer games and, your grandma's birthday. So this weekend's kind of shot, and that's helpful and organizing without it sort of expecting kids with these challenges to internalize what that means. It's like when you map it out for them on a calendar, it's like, oh, you really don't have time on Saturday or Sunday to get this done. Then we're thinking differently about it versus saying repeatedly, like, when are you going to do it? How is it going to get done? I don't know. I don't feel time. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
right,
yeah.
like go back to that part. Like, oh, it sounds fun to me. So I think it's really sitting with and being in it, but not for the whole time or monitoring or telling what to do, but the kind of modeling and mapping and scaffolding that has just that piece to it of I see you where you are and what you're struggling with. I'm going to help you in this way, and then I'm going to step back.
The starting at the end is so helpful to hear you talk about because I'm even thinking about myself because then I'm up, right? I'm up really late working on something because I have a deadline,
Yeah.
but I haven't looked at the date of when I want to have it done and all the time, that I do have
Mhm.
a packed calendar on this time. So it's kind of like I'm sure you see a lot of magical thinking
Yep.
it can happen where, oh, it's just going to happen. But to think about this is when it's due, and these are the pieces that I need to slot in when I'm going to work on it. That's really helpful.
Yeah, and I do that with adults too, and I do it for myself. It's like if I have a workshop I'm giving, and it's like workshop on Wednesday, and I want a friend to review it, I'll say like ask my friend to review it on Monday, so they have time to get back to me. That actually means if I want the weekend with my kids or friends, then I need to actually finish it on Friday. And then what does finishing it mean? Oh, I want someone else to edit it and put it. Look, I'm terrible with Canva. Like someone else has got to do it. And all of a sudden I have to start. I'm like, oh God, I got to start that tomorrow. And I would have had no idea, even though I'm good at that. So when you're not good at that part of it, it becomes crucial to work backward in real time over what you really have and what really needs to happen. And that's very organizing. And I think unfortunately with these kinds of challenges, it's also very common to have anxiety and the perfect storm of then avoidance. And so that's where you get into that spiral, and then you get really stuck in the heat of it all, and it feels like I don't want to even look at that. And so what we're trying to do is hold space for, it's okay to feel worried about this. How do I help support you in your worry, but not avoid, and map it out and then help you initiate it? And that really changes the process.
Gosh, that's so good, Anna. What if your kid's resistant? What if you're trying to sit down with them and they're kind of like, I don't want to sit down with you.
Mine sounded a little more aggressive than that. They didn't say, I don't want to sit down with you. There was cursing and a lot of pushback. So I really,
I
I was like,
know.
I won't say it now, but that's what it sounded like. I mean, listen, I think that this is where it's the painful part where I kept offering, I sat there. And at the end of the day, I made I hired a coach for my own company. I was like, I can't do this in this way. It's going to ruin our relationship. And I found someone that was better suited to work with her than me. I also accepted that she wasn't going to do it my way, and that she might really have to stumble and fall apart a bit and figure it out for herself and ask for the resources that she wanted and her own time and way. And I'm not going to tell you that that was easy. It was very painful for me. It was very hard for me to not feel the pressure of her success in school. That is the decision I made, to give her room to, not do it the way that I wanted her to, and to figure it out for herself. And I found that that preserved more of our relationship. And in the end, I do think that's more important.
Yeah, yeah, that is more important. Thank you for expressing how it was painful for you. It is
Oh, yeah,
painful.
it is
Don't
painful.
talk about that. This is not easy to let go
Mm-mm.
and allow her to take more ownership and responsibility and feel it a little bit more, because we want them to be successful. But what does that even mean in our eyes? We might have our own
Yeah.
agenda, and um, yeah. So yeah, very helpful. I think a lot of moms were like, oh, thank you.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, and I just want to say that this is, there's no world in which it's easy, but for me, I'm so on time. I was never late for a day of school. I was so worried about it. And my daughter started, refusing school and being late. And I was in a panic. And she yelled at me one day, "You are only mean when you're scared." That was my moment of really changing who I was in relationship to her, because she was right. I was like yelling at her to get up and get to school. I was like screaming at her to get, I'm like, "Get up. You have to go to school." It's like if she could get up and go to school, she would get up and go to school. She wasn't trying to be resistant. She was worried and overwhelmed. And instead of listening to a word she was saying, I was becoming more of the problem. And I had to really back off and accept, it's like, if this is where she is, then I need to help her get up. I need to help her manage her worries. I need to help her change her systems. Like, I can't be pounding down on her. But that took a ton of my work, and to be less scared of what it meant to have a kid who might not attend school in the way that, and maybe needed a semester to do it differently. And that's like an extreme example, but I think we all can really relate to the little versions of that, and to make space for how, overwhelming and scary it is, and to do our own work on it.
Hmm. To do our own work. So you really come alongside parents, you come along tweens, teens, and help them through this whole process, which I think is invaluable. I had to get out of the way and get support and help. Numerous different ways that we can do that. But tell people where to find you, and how to contact you, and then what that'll look like.
Okay, thank you for asking. So the company that does the executive functioning coaching and supports kids with all kinds of emotional obstacles to learning and complex neuropsychological profiles, so dysgraphia, different kinds of learning disabilities, dyscalculia, executive functioning, all of those, and any intersection of anxiety with those particular challenges. That's all organizationaltutors.com. Again, named by a friend over dinner. Um, you know, Thank you, Sarah. She really did a good job for me. Um, And that just lists out, it's like the contact form, and then you get to a clinical psychologist and like sort of who's gonna sit with you and think about the intake. And that's not therapy, but it's very specifically going to be about sort of finding the right match for coaching. The adult version of that is actually called Steel Advising, Strategic Thinking and Effective and Efficient Leadership. And and that is for the parents who might be like, oh yeah, I maybe need help these things down.
After they're hearing this, yeah,
Right.
help.
And for those in New York, it's actually Wellness Therapy, but that's only in a New York-based company because that's in-home therapy. But those are the places, and I'm reachable at Anna Levy-Warren, PhD, and I really still work with like very complicated family systems in terms of, therapeutically and doing parent guidance work because I love it. And as you know, I have lived through it and I wanted that kind of support for myself.
Okay, so you will, if they reach out, say it again. It's Anna Levy Warren. Am I saying it
PhD. Yeah.
PhD. So that is your website too. If they're like, oh my gosh, she's fantastic, which you are, I'm going to reach out to her because I need help. Then you can also guide them in what kind of help they even would need. Is it
Sure.
for them?
Absolutely.
Is it for their kid? Is it, yeah,
Yeah. And organizationaltutors.com is for the coaching work and tutoring work, the sort of the like more wide ranging for all the teenagers, out there that may still be, that you're like, oh yeah, I don't want to do the homework battles anymore. I'll have a coach do that. Thank you. I appreciate that.
and what age do you start them? I said tweens, but what age do they usually start doing this?
Actually, we have people coming in as early as 4 or 5, I mean, because especially right now with, like pre-K kids, sometimes, they're expected to get their backpack and their shoes and get out the door. And sometimes you see those struggles really early. So we work with real young and, we work through the graduate students and then the adults. So a full range.
Okay. All right, great. Well, Anna, thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome. And you just shared, yeah, so many good nuggets. And I know that moms are going to feel listening to this so much better. You are not alone. And
That's for
there's
sure.
support out there.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate such an honest and sort of welcoming conversation.